A cowboy expected a plain bride. The wild woman who came changed his life forever. John Harris lived a life most people would call simple, but to him, it was peaceful and enough. His home was a small wooden cabin on the edge of a wide, open plain, far from the noise and bustle of the nearest town. Every morning before the sun had fully risen, he would saddle his horse, Dusty, and ride out to check on the cattle. The wide field stretched endlessly, the grass waving gently in the wind, and the sky above painted in soft shades of orange and pink. The quietness of the land had always been comforting to him, a place where life moved slowly and the small tasks of each day had their own rhythm. John was a man of routine. He liked things to be orderly, predictable, and steady. He liked his tools lined neatly in the barn, the fences in perfect repair, and the cattle accounted for every evening. He enjoyed his work, the physical labor that left him tired but satisfied, and the satisfaction of a job done right. It was a life without drama or surprises, a life where a man knew his place in the world and it suited him fine. Yet, despite his contentment, John often found himself thinking about the future. He was 35, strong and healthy, and had spent most of his adult life working alone. He enjoyed his solitude, but he also knew that life would feel empty without someone to share it with. He had grown up with a family that valued simple pleasures, family dinners, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and the occasional celebration of small victories. But most of them were gone now, leaving him with a longing he could not easily explain. One chilly evening, after a long day in the fields, John sat on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was a deep, velvety blue, dotted with the first stars of night. He held a cup of strong coffee in his hands and thought about what life might look like with a partner. He imagined a woman who would rise with the sun, help him with chores, and share in the quiet satisfaction of ranch life. She would be gentle, soft-spoken, and appreciative of the small joys, a warm meal, a clean home, a quiet evening by the fire. He could almost see her in his mind, modest dress, calm demeanor, and a smile that fit the slow rhythm of his days. John knew it would be difficult to meet someone like that in the small town nearby. The women in the town were kind, of course, but most had their own families or their own lives. He wanted a partner who understood the life of the ranch, someone who could work alongside him, not just someone who would visit occasionally. He wanted a bride, a true partner who would share his dreams and labor with him, and he realized he might have to look beyond the town to find her. One night, after another day of tending cattle and mending fences, John made a decision. He would write to a marriage agency in the city. The agency had promised to help men like him find suitable partners, women who were looking for a quiet life in the country and willing to move far from their homes for love and stability. John was not a man of many words, but he wrote honestly, describing his life, his routines, and the qualities he hoped to find in a wife. He spoke of the ranch, the work, and the simple joys of life on the plains. He made it clear that he sought a woman who valued honesty, hard work, and the peacefulness of rural living. Sending the letter felt like a small but important step. It was a step into the unknown, a step that might bring him the companionship he had longed for. In the following weeks, John continued with his life as usual, tending the cattle, repairing fences, and riding across the fields. Yet, there was a quiet excitement that he could not ignore. Each time he saw a letter delivered to his cabin, his heart would race, wondering if it could be from the agency. Life on the ranch could be lonely at times. Even with Dusty for company, the days stretched long and quiet. The wind would whistle across the plains, and the only sounds were the low mooing of cattle and the occasional cry of a bird overhead. On evenings like these, John would sit by the fire in his cabin, thinking about the life he wanted to share with someone. He imagined cooking meals together, sharing stories of the day, and sitting quietly under the stars. He longed for a woman whose presence would make the empty spaces in the cabin feel like home. John's friends occasionally teased him about his plans. They were good men, fellow cowboys and ranchers who had known him for years. "You're dreaming too much, John," they would say. "A city woman won't like the hard work here. She'll want comforts we don't have." But John only smiled and nodded. He understood their concerns, but he believed that somewhere out there, a woman existed who shared his values, his dreams, and his love for the simple life. Winter began to settle over the plains, covering the fields with frost and making the nights longer and colder. John spent these evenings preparing for the unknown, fixing the cabin, ensuring there was enough firewood, and checking the barn. He imagined that by the time his bride arrived, everything would be ready, every corner of the cabin warm and welcoming, every task of ranch life in order. He wanted her first impression to be one of comfort and security, a life ready to be shared. And then, one cold morning, a letter finally arrived. It bore the official seal of the agency, and John's hand shook slightly as he tore it open. The letter was brief but clear. His bride was ready to travel west, and she would arrive at the town station in 3 days. John could hardly believe it. For weeks, he had imagined this moment, and now it was about to come true. His heart was filled with anticipation, hope, and a little nervousness. Who was this woman? Would she truly fit the life he had prepared for her? John spent the next few days in a whirlwind of preparation. He polished the cabin, scrubbed the floors, and tidied every corner. He mended old fences and repaired gates, making sure the ranch looked its best. Dusty was groomed and fed, ready to carry him to the station and perhaps beyond. John could feel a mixture of excitement and worry. What if she didn't like the life here? What if she found the work too hard or the isolation too lonely? Yet beneath the worry was a deeper feeling, a quiet, steady hope that the woman who arrived would bring warmth, laughter, and companionship to his life. Finally, the day came. John rose before the sun, dressed in his best clothes and saddled Dusty for the ride to the station. The morning was crisp, the air sharp with frost, and the plains stretched endlessly in the pale light. He rode with a steady pace, his thoughts alternating between hope and caution. He imagined a quiet woman, shy but kind, stepping down from the train and smiling nervously at him. He imagined a gentle voice, careful manners, and a calm acceptance of his way of life. As he approached the station, John's heart beat faster. The small wooden building sat quietly by the tracks, smoke curling from the chimney. He dismounted Dusty and tied him to a post, his eyes scanning the tracks for the approaching train. He could hear the faint whistle in the distance, the sound growing louder with every passing moment. And then, as the train slowed to a stop, John waited, unsure of what he would see, but certain that his life was about to change. The train hissed and groaned as it slowed to a stop at the small station. John Harris stood by Dusty, the crisp morning air nipping at his face. He had been waiting for this moment for weeks, imagining a shy, quiet woman stepping down from the carriage, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes downcast, wearing a calm and modest smile. He had pictured her in a plain dress, her hair tied simply, unassuming and gentle. He had even rehearsed what he might say, how he might greet her, and how he would lead her to the cabin he had prepared so carefully for her arrival. As the train doors clanged open, John felt a rush of nervous anticipation. He straightened his shoulders and adjusted his hat, trying to appear calm. He could see passengers stepping down, some children, some families, some travelers, but none of them seemed like the woman he had imagined. His eyes scanned the platform, waiting, searching, hoping. And then he saw her. She stepped off the train with a confident stride, her posture straight, her head held high. Her hair was untamed, blowing slightly in the morning wind, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity and energy. She looked around the station with interest, taking in every detail, and when her gaze finally landed on John, she smiled. A bright, lively smile that was impossible to ignore. John blinked. This was not the quiet, modest woman he had expected. This woman, Clara, as he soon learned her name, radiated energy, independence, and a kind of wild charm that made her presence impossible to overlook. Her clothes were neat but not plain, suited more to travel and adventure than to the slow, measured life of the ranch. She carried herself with confidence, speaking freely with the station master, asking questions about the journey and laughing at small jokes. For a moment, John didn't know what to say. His mind raced. This was not the image he had built in his heart. She was bold, lively, and completely different from what he had imagined. Yet, at the same time, there was something compelling about her presence, a spark that drew him in, even though he didn't understand it yet. "Are you John Harris?" she asked, her voice clear and friendly as if she already knew him. "Yes," John replied, tipping his hat nervously. "I'm John, you must be Clara." "That's me," she said, holding out her hand. Her grip was firm and confident, not shy or timid as he had expected. "It's good to finally meet you." John shook her hand, feeling the strength and energy in it. She didn't hesitate or falter. Instead, she looked directly at him, her eyes bright and full of curiosity. He could see the intelligence and confidence in her gaze, and a strange mix of surprise and admiration stirred within him. The journey back to the ranch was filled with conversation. Clara asked questions about the land, the ranch, and the cattle. She was eager to learn, not intimidated by the wide open plains or the hard work of ranch life. John answered cautiously at first, still unsure how she would adapt to this world so different from the one she had left behind. But her enthusiasm was infectious. She listened intently, laughed freely, and even made light-hearted jokes about the long, dusty ride. When they arrived at the cabin, Clara's eyes widened in delight. She stepped down from the carriage, brushing the dust from her clothes, and looked around at the open fields, the barn, and the small wooden cabin. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice full of wonder. "I've never seen anything like this. The sky, the land, it's incredible." John felt a small thrill of pride. He had worked hard to build this life, and here was someone who could see its beauty. Yet he also felt a twinge of anxiety. Would she truly fit into this world? Could she handle the long days of work, the isolation, and the simplicity that defined his life? He had expected a quiet, obedient partner, not someone with so much energy and personality. The first days were an adjustment for both of them. Clara threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, eager to learn but also unwilling to be confined by tradition or routine. She rode horses with confidence, often faster and wilder than John thought safe. She helped with the cattle, not just following instructions but experimenting, asking questions, and even challenging John's methods. At first, he felt frustrated. He had imagined guiding a careful, cautious partner, not someone who would push the boundaries of what he considered safe or normal. Yet, as he watched her, John began to notice something remarkable. Clara's energy was not reckless. It was thoughtful, curious, and full of life. She didn't just throw herself into tasks blindly. She observed, learned, and adapted. She had a way of seeing solutions he hadn't thought of noticing small details that made life on the ranch smoother. Her laughter filled the air, echoing across the plains, and slowly, John felt a warmth he had never experienced before. Evenings brought new discoveries. Around the small cabin fireplace, Clara would tell stories of her life in the city, of adventures and challenges she had faced, of friends she had known, and of dreams she had nurtured. John listened, fascinated. Her world had been very different from his, yet her experiences had shaped a person strong, intelligent, and capable. He began to understand that the wildness he had initially feared was not chaos. It was courage, independence, and joy in living. Despite the growing bond, there were moments of tension. John struggled to balance his desire for order with Clara's love of spontaneity. She would rearrange things in the cabin, cook meals differently than he expected, or insist on trying new methods with the cattle. At first, he bristled, feeling a loss of control over the carefully managed life he had built. But gradually, he realized that her influence was not destructive, it was transformative. She brought creativity, energy, and joy into the routine that had once defined his existence. One afternoon, John found Clara sitting atop a hill looking out over the plains. She had taken Dusty's saddle and rode up alone, laughing as the wind whipped through her hair. "This land," she said, turning to him, "it's like a canvas, so much potential, so much freedom. I never knew life could feel this open." John watched her, feeling a mixture of admiration and humility. He had lived on this land for years, thinking he understood it fully, but Clara saw it in ways he never had. Her perspective was fresh, vibrant, and alive. He realized that her arrival had changed not just his expectations of a partner, but his perception of life itself. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, John began to adapt. He learned to appreciate Clara's energy, to see the humor in her boldness, and to embrace the unpredictability she brought. The ranch, once a place of strict routine, became a space of laughter, creativity, and shared adventure. The cattle seemed to respond to the new energy as well, as if the land itself welcomed the change. John also noticed how Clara was changing herself. She was learning the rhythms of ranch life, but she did not lose her spirit in the process. She respected the work, the animals, and the land, but she infused it with her own personality, making tasks easier, faster, and often more enjoyable. She brought music to the long days, singing softly while she worked, or telling stories that made even the hardest labor feel lighter. By the end of the first month, John had begun to see a truth he could not deny. Clara was exactly what he had needed, even if she was nothing like what he had imagined. She had brought life, energy, and courage into his quiet world, challenging him to see beyond routine and predictability. The bond between them grew stronger each day, built on mutual respect, admiration, and the recognition that together, they could face any challenge the plains might bring. The arrival of Clara, the wild woman he had not expected, had turned John's world upside down in the most wonderful way. She had not only joined his life but had expanded it, reshaping his understanding of love, companionship, and the richness of life itself. And as he watched her ride across the fields, laughing and free, John knew that his life would never be the same again, and he was beginning to understand that he would not want it to be. Life on the ranch with Clara was nothing like John had imagined. Every morning, he woke to the sound of Dusty pawing at the ground, and every morning, he was reminded that this new life would be full of surprises. Clara's energy was boundless. She moved with a purpose that seemed unstoppable, tackling chores with determination, but also in ways John had never seen before. Where he had planned for careful, methodical steps, she charged ahead, learning as she went and discovering new methods of her own. At first, John found it frustrating. He had spent years perfecting his routines. He knew which fence posts needed repairing first, which cows required special attention, and which areas of the pasture needed more water. Clara would often change the order of things, moving from task to task with energy that seemed chaotic to him. "Clara," he said one morning, standing in the barn with arms crossed, "you can't just do everything at once. There's a system here and it works." Clara laughed, brushing her hair from her face. "I know there's a system, John," she replied, "but sometimes the system can wait. The work needs to be done, and I'm going to get it done my way." Her confidence both annoyed and fascinated him. She was not disrespectful. She simply refused to be confined by the boundaries he had always accepted. She asked questions constantly, challenging his assumptions, suggesting different ways to handle the cattle, the crops, and even the daily routines. At first, he bristled at every suggestion, certain that her ideas would only make work harder. But slowly, he began to notice that some of her ideas were actually better. They saved time, prevented accidents, and even made life on the ranch more enjoyable. One afternoon, John decided to teach Clara how to rope cattle. He had done it hundreds of times, and he expected her to struggle at first, but Clara was fearless. She held the rope with determination, listened carefully to his instructions, and when she tried, she almost caught the cow on her very first attempt. John watched, amazed. He had never seen someone so bold, so willing to face challenges head-on. "You've got a knack for this," he admitted, his voice tinged with surprise. Clara smiled proudly. "I told you, John, I can handle it. I just need to learn how your way works too." Their days were a mix of hard work and unexpected laughter. Clara's boldness created situations that John could never have imagined. She would ride faster than he thought safe, sometimes challenging him to keep up. She experimented with new ways to feed the cattle and repair fences, occasionally causing minor chaos, but always learning and adapting. John realized that she wasn't careless. She was curious, independent, and fearless in her desire to understand life on the ranch. Evenings brought another kind of challenge. Around the fireplace, Clara would talk about her life in the city, about friends, adventures, and dreams she had chased. John listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes with surprise, realizing that her experiences had shaped a woman who was not just independent, but insightful, intelligent, and endlessly interesting. He began to enjoy these stories, seeing in her a world he had never known, one full of color, energy, and possibility. Despite the excitement she brought, there were moments of tension. John struggled to accept change. Clara's energy sometimes clashed with his need for order. He would find her rearranging the cabin, moving furniture, or trying new ways to cook meals. At first, he would frown and insist on returning things to the way they had always been. But over time, he noticed that her changes often made life easier and more comfortable. The cabin felt warmer, cozier, and more alive with her presence. The ranch itself seemed to respond to Clara's energy. Even Dusty, John's loyal horse, seemed more spirited and eager. The cattle were calmer around her, as if they sensed her confidence and presence. John began to notice small changes in himself as well. He laughed more freely, tried new methods he would have dismissed before, and even found joy in tasks that once felt monotonous. Clara's influence was subtle but powerful, reshaping the way he approached life and work. One day, a storm rolled across the plains. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind picked up, bending the tall grass and rattling the fences. John and Clara were out checking the cattle when the first drops of rain began to fall. "We need to get back to the barn," John shouted over the wind, worry in his voice. Clara, however, didn't panic. She guided the horses with confidence, keeping her calm even as the rain poured down. She encouraged the cattle, helping to lead them to shelter, and worked tirelessly to secure gates and fences. John found himself relying on her in ways he had never anticipated. Her boldness and quick thinking saved the animals and prevented damage to the property. That night, soaked and exhausted, they sat by the fireplace, drying their clothes and warming their hands. John looked at Clara and realized he had underestimated her. She wasn't reckless, she was courageous. She didn't just face challenges, she met them head-on with energy, intelligence, and a sense of purpose. He began to see that her presence on the ranch was not a disruption, but a gift. The days that followed brought new lessons. John began to experiment, trying tasks in the ways Clara had suggested. He discovered that her methods often worked better, saved time, and even made work more enjoyable. He began to look forward to her ideas, her perspective, and her energy. Their relationship shifted from cautious cooperation to true partnership. He was no longer just a teacher, she was a partner, a guide, and an inspiration. Clara also learned from John. She began to understand the rhythms of ranch life, the importance of routine, and the care required for the animals and land. She didn't lose her spirit or energy. She combined it with the skills John had taught her, creating a unique approach that benefited them both. She learned patience, planning, and precision, and John learned courage, flexibility, and the joy of unexpected experiences. As spring arrived, the ranch seemed more alive than ever. The fields were green and full of new growth, the cattle were healthy, and the cabin felt warmer and more welcoming than it ever had. John and Clara had settled into a rhythm that balanced their differences. They laughed, worked, and faced challenges together. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. John realized something important. Clara's wildness was not a problem to be fixed, it was a strength to be embraced. Her boldness had challenged him, changed him, and shown him a life he had never imagined. The quiet, predictable life he had once dreamed of now seemed incomplete without the energy, passion, and perspective she brought. She had transformed not only the ranch but his heart, teaching him that love could be bold, exciting, and life-changing. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the plains, Clara turned to him with a smile. "You've taught me so much about this land," she said, "but I think I've taught you a few things too." John laughed softly. "I think you have," he admitted. "I never knew life could feel this full, this alive." She reached out and took his hand. "We make a good team, don't we?" "We do," John replied, squeezing her hand. "A better team than I ever imagined." In that moment, John understood that the wild woman he had never expected was exactly what he had needed. Their worlds, so different at first, had come together to create something stronger, richer, and more beautiful than either of them could have imagined alone. As the weeks turned into months, John began to see the world differently. Clara's presence on the ranch had not only changed the daily routines but had changed him. He no longer approached life with the quiet caution that had once defined him. Instead, he felt alive in ways he had never imagined, ready to face challenges, take small risks, and enjoy the unexpected moments. Clara, too, had changed. She had learned the rhythms of ranch life, the patterns of the cattle, and the needs of the land. She still carried her boldness and adventurous spirit, but now it was tempered with understanding, patience, and a deeper appreciation for John's way of life. She no longer tried to fight every routine. Instead, she adapted her energy to work with it. In doing so, she found a joy that was different from the excitement of city life, a steady, satisfying happiness that came from living fully in the moment. One morning, John watched Clara ride Dusty across the field, her laughter echoing through the crisp air. She was guiding a small group of calves toward the barn, her movements confident and precise. John could see the care in her eyes, the understanding of each animal's needs, and the joy she took in helping them. It was a side of her he had not fully appreciated before, the gentle strength that matched her wild energy. "You're getting better every day," John called, his voice carrying across the field. Clara turned, smiling brightly. "I'm learning from the best," she replied. "And I think I might be teaching you a thing or two as well." John chuckled. He knew she was right. Her presence had challenged him in ways that had made him a better man. He had learned to be more patient, more flexible, and more willing to embrace change. Her courage had shown him that life did not have to be predictable to be meaningful. Evenings became their favorite time of day. After long hours working in the fields, they would sit on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky would turn shades of pink and orange, and the plains would glow in the fading light. They would share stories of their day, laugh at mistakes, and talk about their dreams. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, Clara surprised John with a small picnic by the river that ran along the edge of the property. She had packed simple foods, but she had done it with care, adding little touches that made the meal feel special. They sat on a blanket, their feet dangling near the water, watching the sun's reflection ripple across the surface. "I love this," Clara said softly, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. I never knew life could feel so rich in simplicity. Back in the city, I was always rushing, always planning. Here, it's different. It's alive. John reached for her hand. I know, he said. You've shown me that life doesn't have to be predictable to be beautiful. I used to think I needed control over everything. Now I see there's beauty in letting go sometimes. Clara smiled, squeezing his hand. And there's joy in taking risks, too, even small ones. That's how we grow, John. Their partnership extended beyond the work and daily routines. They began to dream together, planning small improvements to the ranch, imagining future adventures, and thinking about the family they might one day have. John, who had once imagined a quiet, modest bride, realized that Clara's wild spirit was exactly what he had needed. She had transformed the ranch, but she had also transformed him, opening his heart to possibilities he had never considered. One day, they faced a challenge that tested their partnership like never before. A fire had started on a neighboring property, and the wind threatened to carry the flames toward the ranch. John felt a surge of fear, knowing the danger it posed to their home, the cattle, and the fields. Clara, however, remained calm. She immediately began helping him secure the cattle, fill buckets of water, and set up barriers to slow the fire's spread. Together, they worked tirelessly, moving with purpose and coordination. John realized in that moment that Clara's energy and courage were invaluable. She did not panic. She acted with intelligence, focus, and determination. When the danger passed, they sat together, exhausted but relieved. The ranch was safe, and John felt a deep gratitude for her presence. You were incredible today, he said, his voice filled with admiration. Clara smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. We did it together. That's what matters. It was in moments like these that John truly understood the depth of their bond. Clara was not just a partner in work. She was a partner in life. Her courage, energy, and perspective complemented his strength, patience, and wisdom. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. Over time, John began to embrace Clara's wildness fully. He learned to ride faster, take more risks, and even experiment with new methods on the ranch. He discovered that life could be exciting without being dangerous, unpredictable without being chaotic. Clara's influence had reshaped him, teaching him that joy could be found in moments of spontaneity, in laughter, in daring to try new things. Clara, too, had found balance. She no longer sought to change every routine. Instead, she infused her energy into the life they had built together. She found happiness in tending the fields, caring for the cattle, and enjoying quiet evenings by the fire. Her wild spirit had not diminished. It had grown wiser, more purposeful, and more deeply connected to the life she shared with John. Their love deepened with each passing day. It was a love built on respect, admiration, and shared experiences. They had faced challenges, adapted to differences, and learned from one another. The quiet cowboy had discovered a partner who could challenge him, inspire him, and make life richer. The wild woman had found a home where her energy was valued, her courage respected, and her heart cherished. One evening, as they watched the stars appear in the vast night sky, John felt a profound sense of gratitude. I never imagined life could feel like this, he said softly. Clara leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Neither did I, she replied, but I'm glad it does. In that moment, John realized that the life he had once envisioned, a quiet, predictable existence, would never have brought him the fulfillment he now felt. Clara's wildness had transformed not only the ranch, but his understanding of love, partnership, and life itself. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a home filled with laughter, adventure, and deep connection. The seasons changed, and with each passing year their bond grew stronger. Spring brought new growth to the fields, summer brought long, warm days, autumn brought harvest and reflection, and winter brought quiet moments by the fire. Through it all, they faced life together, learning, adapting, and growing. John often reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought Clara to the ranch. He had expected a quiet, modest bride, someone who would fit neatly into his orderly life. Instead, he had received a wild, spirited woman who had challenged him, inspired him, and changed his world completely. And he knew, without a doubt, that life would never be as full, as joyful, or as meaningful without her. Clara had shown him that love was not about fitting into a mold or following a plan. It was about embracing differences, learning from each other, and creating a life together that was greater than the sum of its parts. She had taught him courage, joy, and the beauty of living fully in the present. And in turn, he had taught her patience, understanding, and the strength that comes from quiet determination. Together, they had transformed the ranch, their lives, and their hearts. John no longer feared change, unpredictability, or challenges. He had learned to trust Clara, to embrace her energy, and to find joy in the unexpected. And Clara, who had once sought adventure and excitement, had found a home where her spirit could soar freely, where her heart was safe, and where her love was returned in equal measure. In the quiet of the plains, under the vast sky, John and Clara had discovered something rare and precious, a love that was alive, dynamic, and enduring. They had faced life's challenges together, celebrated its joys, and built a partnership that neither had anticipated but both had needed. And as the stars twinkled above, they knew that their journey was only beginning, that together they could face anything, grow through anything, and find happiness in every moment of the life they shared. Years passed on the ranch, and John Harris often reflected on the journey his life had taken. What had started as a quiet, predictable existence had transformed into something vibrant, alive, and full of love, all because of Clara. She had been the unexpected visitor, the wild woman who had challenged him from the very moment she stepped off the train. And yet she had become the most important part of his life, the one who had changed him, the ranch, and their shared world forever. The ranch had never been so full of life. The fields were lush and green, dotted with healthy cattle grazing under the wide, endless sky. The fences were strong, the barns tidy, and the small cabin that John had once imagined as quiet and orderly now radiated warmth and laughter. Clara had infused the home with her energy, creativity, and care. Flowers now grew along the porch, baskets of fresh herbs hung near the kitchen, and the smell of baked bread often filled the air. Every corner of the cabin reflected the balance they had found between order and spontaneity, discipline and freedom. John's life had changed in ways he could never have predicted. He had learned to embrace adventure, to laugh freely, and to take joy in moments that once might have seemed trivial or chaotic. Clara had shown him that life was not about control, perfection, or predictability. It was about connection, courage, and living fully in the present. He had discovered a kind of happiness that was richer and deeper than he had ever imagined, one that came not from routine alone, but from partnership, love, and shared experiences. Clara had changed too, though in ways that complemented rather than replaced her spirit. She remained the lively, bold, and independent woman John had first met, but now she moved with a sense of purpose, rooted in understanding and respect for their life together. She had learned the rhythms of ranch life, mastered the skills needed to care for the animals and land, and found joy in the stability that John's world offered. Her boldness had not diminished, it had matured, creating a harmony between her adventurous spirit and the steady life of the plains. Together, they had built a life that neither could have imagined alone. They celebrated small victories, the birth of healthy calves, a bountiful harvest, and the repair of a fence after a storm, as well as larger accomplishments like improving the land, expanding the barn, and learning new methods to care for the ranch. Each success was a shared success, a testament to the teamwork, trust, and mutual respect that had grown between them over the years. The neighbors often remarked on the remarkable transformation. John Harris, the The quiet cowboy who had once been content with solitude and routine now seemed more alive, more confident, and even more joyful. Clara's influence was evident to anyone who visited. The laughter in the cabin, the energy in the fields, and the harmony of their partnership were impossible to miss. Yet John and Clara cared little for the opinions of others. They measured their success by the strength of their bond, the happiness they found in each day, and the life they had built together. Children came into their lives as well, bringing new joy and challenges. The first child, a boy with his mother's spark and his father's quiet determination, filled the cabin with laughter, questions, and boundless energy. Clara delighted in teaching him to ride, tend the small animals, and explore the field safely. John found joy in guiding him patiently, showing him the ways of the ranch while encouraging his curiosity. Each day with their children was filled with love, lessons, and small adventures, echoing the partnership that had first begun between John and Clara. Life was not without its challenges. Seasons brought storms, harsh winters, and occasional sickness among the cattle. There were moments of worry, hard work, and fatigue. Yet John and Clara faced each challenge together, relying on the lessons they had learned, the trust they had built, and the strength they drew from each other. They had learned that life's difficulties were easier to face when shared, and that love, partnership, and courage could overcome even the harshest trials. One particularly harsh winter tested them more than most. Snow fell heavily for days, covering the fields in thick white, making it difficult to reach the cattle or tend the land. John worried about their animals, and Clara worked tirelessly to ensure they were fed, sheltered, and safe. Together, they carried hay through deep snow, checked fences, and kept the fire in the cabin roaring. Exhausted but satisfied, they would sit by the fireplace each night, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of relief that the day's work had been accomplished. Through these challenges, John realized something profound. Clara had not only changed his life, she had changed who he was. He was no longer the man who longed only for predictability and calm. He was a man who embraced life fully, welcomed adventure, and found joy in the unexpected. Clara had taught him that love was not about fitting into a mold, but about growing together, learning from one another, and celebrating differences. Clara had also learned the depth of John's strength. She had discovered that beneath his calm exterior lay a man of determination, wisdom, and unwavering loyalty. He had faced challenges with patience, guided her through the intricacies of ranch life, and loved her without trying to change her. In John, she had found a partner who balanced her boldness with quiet confidence, creating a harmony that made their life together richer and more complete. Years later, John and Clara would often sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, reflecting on how far they had come. The land stretched endlessly, golden in the light of the setting sun, and the sounds of the ranch, the low mooing of the cattle, the rustle of the wind through the grass, the occasional bark of a dog created a comforting symphony. They would hold hands, sharing a quiet smile, knowing that they had built a life full of love, adventure, and partnership. Their love had become a source of strength, inspiration, and joy. It was a love that embraced differences, celebrated individuality, and encouraged growth. It was a love that had transformed two very different people into a team, a family, and a home that was more than just a place. It was a feeling, a shared life, a promise fulfilled. John often thought back to the day Clara had arrived. He had expected a quiet, modest bride, someone who would fit neatly into his orderly life. Instead, he had received a wild, spirited woman who had challenged him, inspired him, and opened his heart to a world he had never imagined. He realized that the life he had once envisioned would never have brought him the happiness he now felt. Clara's presence had transformed every aspect of his world, teaching him lessons he would never forget. Clara, too, would reflect on those early days. She remembered the nervous, cautious man she had met at the station, the quiet cowboy who had expected predictability and order. She smiled at how far they had come, how their differences had become strengths, and how their partnership had grown into something unbreakable. She knew that their love had not been easy, but it had been worth every challenge, every lesson, and every moment of growth. Together, John and Clara had created a legacy, a life that blended courage and patience, wildness and calm, energy and stability. They had built a home where laughter was constant, love was deep, and adventure was always welcome. The ranch was not just land and animals. It was a living testament to the power of partnership, trust, and love. And so, as the sun set on the wide plains, John and Clara sat together on the porch, their hands intertwined, hearts full and spirits content. They had faced life's challenges, celebrated its joys, and built a life that neither could have imagined alone. The wild woman had come into the cowboy's life and transformed it forever. Together, they had discovered that love was not about fitting expectations, but about embracing the unexpected, growing together, and finding joy in every moment. John looked at Clara and whispered, "I never expected this, but I'm glad it came." Clara smiled, leaning against him. "Neither did I, but I wouldn't change a thing." And in the quiet of the plains, under the vast, endless sky, John and Clara knew that their journey together was not just a story of love. It was a story of life, growth, and the power of embracing the unexpected. Their hearts were full, their bond unbreakable, and their future open, waiting for all the adventures yet to come.